Baseball is back, and at Team Toyota, savings and selection are back too. With tons of new Toyota SUVs, trucks, and hybrids to choose from, and with our lineup of over 200 certified used Toyotas, you can find the right fit for you and your budget. Plus, our service and collision centers are here to get you back in the game in no time. Visit one of our 3 locations in Princeton, Langhorne, or Glen Mills, or online at teamtoyota.net. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Phillies Talk podcast presented by Team Toyota. I'm Corey Seidman, along with Spencer McKercher here, less than a week away from opening day. We're sitting down on Friday morning, March 21st. The Phillies open the season in D.C. on March 27th, and there's a lot to talk about, a lot of developments this week, the final full week at Phillies camp. Spencer, let's start with Ranger Suarez, because news from Rob Thompson the other day, he told reporters after I think it was Wednesday's game that Suarez is dealing with some back stiffness, which is why he's not starting Friday. Cause for concern, in my opinion, because Suarez missed time last year with a back injury. There's a history there. You know, he didn't pitch in the All-Star game because of back spasms. He then missed a month from July 27 through August 24 with back soreness, and now back stiffness comes up before the regular season begins. We talked about the Phillies rotation being a strength, and already here it's seeming to be tested.
It is, dude. And you mentioned Ranger, was dealing with that back injury that kind of derailed a heck of his first start to the season for Ranger last year. And now, this kind of comes up after he threw 60 pitches the other day. Yeah, man. We've talked a lot about the depth over the last few months here. And I think now that it's come to fruition, and I think the easy answer right now is if Ranger does miss time, and I know Rob Thompson said that, the next 24 to 48 hours, which I guess it's been 48 hours now, we'll see. But it could throw Taijuan Walker right back into this mix in the starting rotation, which could excite a lot of people, could make a lot of people nervous. But I don't know. We've hit on it multiple times on this podcast over the last few months of Taijuan Walker's availability and his strength, and he's looked good in spring, but has also kind of struggled a little bit. So now you throw in this kind of wrench in the rotation with Ranger, and we kept saying just get through the spring healthy, and hopefully this isn't too bad. And I'm sure we'll get to it. But yeah, there's a positive, hopefully some positive news on Not Strom here as well. But as for Ranger, man, yeah, this would not derail a lot of things, but maybe kind of bring the excitement down for Phillies fans a little bit. Just if he misses some time, especially maybe even starts the season on the IL. But again, then that leads to Taijuan Walker getting another opportunity.
Yeah, the way I look at it, the Phillies have to keep the long game in mind here. I mean, that's what they talked about. It's what they talked about on day one of spring training. And, we'll wait to hear what the deal is with Ranger Suarez, if this back injury is lingering, if he's already throwing by early next week and where that leaves him. But the Phillies are obviously, before they feel comfortable opening the season with him in their rotation, the Phillies would need to see Suarez probably face hitters and then see how he responds the next day, because it's not just about how he performs in the moment, if he's throwing a bullpen session or a live batting practice session. It's also about how he feels the next morning when he wakes up, right? So when you keep the long game in mind, when you think about preserving your pitcher's innings throughout a long season, because October is what matters most, it makes no sense to rush a guy like that out of the gate, right? I mean, Ranger Suarez was lining up as the Phillies' 5th starter in order anyway. So that first start would have lined up for April 2nd, which would be one of would that have been the 5th game of the season against the Rockies at home. So even between now and then, that's still about 11 days away, right? So there's still a little bit of time for Ranger Suarez. But if they skip him once or twice, that gives him the ability to get back to where he was potentially. You want a guy out of camp to be built up, 85 or so pitches, right? You mentioned Suarez got up to 60 in his most recent start. And early in the season, he's not going to be going super deep into games anyway. Those first couple starts for Ranger Suarez might have been 4 innings anyway, because the Phillies, their guys aren't built up to that level just yet, especially Suarez here. But, big year for him, contract year, starting it off with, feeling a little bit of back stiffness here, and the Phillies are just going to cross their fingers, hope it's no big deal. They have been seeming to get good news on Matt Strom, as you've mentioned, that, Strom's dealing with this left shoulder impingement that affected his velocity, but it sounds like he's feeling better. It sounds like the velocity's creeping back up. Very valuable member of the Phillies bullpen, maybe the leader in that bullpen, honestly. It seems like a lot of the guys look to him at that point as that now entering year 3 as a Philly, but so good. But again, same with Suarez. If you open the season against the Nationals and Matt Strom isn't in your bullpen, it's not the end of the world. If you have to carry someone else for 2 weeks that you thought you weren't going to have to in April, not the end of the world. What matters most is that these guys are throwing 95, 97 miles per hour in August, September, October.
Exactly. And again, that's what the long game is what matters here. And getting through October healthy and at the right pace is what matters the most here. And hopefully some of these guys can kind of get that health as the season goes on, and knock on wood, we don't see anything crazy. Dude, I did want to ask you, kind of going back to the rotation, do you think there would be any, I guess, like, would Rob Thompson thinking about, because you do have those 2 extra off days. It's that weird Friday they're off, then they're off Tuesday after the home opener. Could you like backtrack some of those days? Because we know Zach Wheeler doesn't really like that extended rest. And if you throw in an extra day there, could we see maybe Zach Wheeler pitch on Wednesday instead of that 5th spot on April 2nd, just because we don't like, we know he doesn't like those extra long days, and starting the season with 2 off days, which I get you have to do because of weather and anything else that can happen. But could you see Zach Wheeler maybe start that second game at home here against the Rockies?
Yeah, I mean, teams do that sometimes. They skip their 5th starter the first cycle through the rotation because, as you mentioned, the Phillies, they have those built-in off days. After game 1 of the season, there's an off day, and after game 4 of the season, there's an off day. The reason that MLB does that is because there's a lot of weather concerns early in the season, so it gives you a chance to not have to figure out a makeup date later in the year. You can just make it up right then. I, again, would just say it's the first week of the season. Why not give the guy an extra day? Why? Also, that first start, if it comes up against the Rockies for Taijuan Walker, the Rockies are one of the worst teams in all of baseball. The Rockies are an offense that stinks, and they're going to be on the road where they don't hit. So if there's a soft landing spot for Taijuan Walker, it's a home game against the Colorado Rockies,
Correct.
So my preference there, if I'm ruling the world, would be that the Phillies just give these guys as much time as they need, Suarez, Strom. And we've been talking about making it to camp healthy. A lot of teams are dealing with this. Braves, Mets have been ravaged by injuries. The Yankees lost Garrett Cole, which is a much more significant injury. Taijuan Walker faced those Yankees, by the way, on Thursday or on Wednesday, and he got hit around. So that was not inspiring, but it is good that he's been throwing with additional velocity this year in spring, like 93 miles per hour compared to 88, 89 a year ago. And then, you have the depth pieces like Joe Ross, Nabil Krismat, Tyler Phillips, who, 2 of those guys now might make the team if both Suarez and Strom can't go, but we'll just await news there. The other big development this week is that the Phillies made their decision at backup catcher. They optioned Garrett Stubbs at AAA Lehigh Valley. They're going with Rafael Marchand. And, we've talked about that it wasn't necessarily like a big surprise. The writing was on the wall that it was going to be Marchand's job unless he just stunk this spring or got hurt. Just your reaction to Garrett Stubbs, who's a fan favorite and a clubhouse favorite, not opening the season with the team.
Anyway, and dude, I give Garrett a lot of credit for talking to the media yesterday. Some of the guys that were down there, we got the video from Phillies.com, and you could just kind of tell the dejection in his voice, because he said that it was kind of in the back of his mind all spring that this could be a possibility. And then when you get that tap on the shoulder and it's, come into Rob's office and, well, you have to have this conversation. It's tough, man. Because again, we've talked about it. These guys are human beings too. And Garrett even mentioned, he feels like he's been a big integral part of being a clubhouse guy and, hanging around these guys and being that kind of guy to lift the vibes up. He's the vibes guy, right? But man, I think just his struggles at the plate. I saw me and Ricky Bowe were actually just talking about this yesterday. This crazy stat of like he saw so many sliders. I forget last year. I think it was like 100 and some sliders, and he hit 0.000. And just I want this to work out for Stubby. I think that's the thing. He's gonna still be a big part of this, even in Lehigh. Because as we've seen, Rafael Marchand has not stayed healthy over the last few years, and this has been a big talking point. So, and then I think Marchand got hit in the elbow yesterday, right, in the game yesterday too. So you never know with these kind of things, but it is unfortunate for Garrett. I know he's pretty bummed about it, but I still don't, it's not going to be the last time we see Garrett Stubbs. And, as you mentioned in your article on NBC Sports Philadelphia.com, it was the right move. Just because, not barring any contracts or anything, just Rafael Marchand's out of options. So the only way that you keep him on the roster, and he's a young, talented catcher, is to send Garrett down and keep him up there. So I'm excited for Marchand. I think fans are excited as well, especially, with JT. This has been the talking point for a while now of JT getting more rest days and getting off his feet a little bit more and not catching as many games. Rob Thompson has mentioned that he's had the conversation with JT. So we could see Rafael Marchand a good bit. It's just, it's still the human aspect of it. And, I like to think that Garrett and I have a relationship as well. And I'm bummed for him too. But hey, it's baseball, and it comes down to the business of baseball, and that's it.
So one of these modern phrases that I can't stand on Twitter and social media is when people say this is malpractice, it's journalistic malpractice if you don't mention something, or it's managerial malpractice if you leave a pitcher in too long. It would have been organizational malpractice if the Phillies went with Garrett Stubbs over Rafael Marchand and lost, a potential backup or 1B type of catcher for nothing just to go with Stubbs as their backup. That just would have made no sense whatsoever. There was a point in camp where Rob Thompson said that if one guy outperformed the other by a lot, it wasn't going to matter, all that contract stuff. But I don't buy that. I just, it would have taken an injury to Marchand, or if he hit 0, or if he got traded in order for that to happen. And I do agree with your point that Stubbs this isn't the last time he's ever stepped foot into the clubhouse at Citizens Bank Park. Marchand, lots of injuries over the years, back, shoulder, hamate bone, hamstring. He needs to prove that he can stay healthy over a full season. JT Realmuto turned 34 years old this week, and while he's been amazingly healthy for a catcher who carries that sort of workload, he only spent 10 days on the IL over his first 5 seasons, did JT Realmuto. Then he missed significant time last year with the meniscus injury. But you're probably going to need a third catcher at some point before September, and Stubbs is a pretty good depth piece to have. More than just a vibes guy, does a lot in terms of game planning, working with pitchers, helping them out, bringing them along. A lot of guys like throwing to him. And offensively, you just need a little bit more. And Marchand has shown a little bit more. There's some upside there. And this is the best opportunity of his career, Marchand. Dave Dombrowski talked to reporters about him on Thursday and said that, he's a guy that the Phillies have gotten a lot of calls about over the last 6 months in terms of trade activity, that once upon a time teams saw him as a frontline starting type catcher prospect, and injuries kind of changed that equation. But now he has a pretty good opportunity. Another guy who has a pretty good opportunity, it looks like, going into the season is Brandon Marsh. And it feels like deja vu or Groundhog Day or whatever the cliche is, that Phillies are talking again about Marsh believing in him against lefties, are going to let him play against lefties again. I need to see it to believe it. I do think he'll be in the lineup on opening day against Mackenzie Gore, because Mackenzie Gore, if you look at his career splits, lefties have hit way better against him over his career than righties. And the Phillies have even done that over the years. They've used their lefties against Mackenzie Gore for that reason. But I'll believe it when I see it, because are you really going to start 5 left-handed hitters in prominent lineup spots, a couple of them back to back, against lefties, and knowing these bullpens that teams have? I still think ideally for the Phillies, they have a right-handed hitter who comes in and spells Marsh or spells Kepler and establishes himself. Maybe that's Johan Rojas. Maybe that's Weston Wilson when he's healthy. But Rojas, he has only played the field, I think, once all spring, right?
Yep.
Because of the
he
shoulder
just came
injury.
back, right? Yeah.
So that outfield picture, there's still kind of a little bit of a mystery there.
Which is funny, because that's been a topic of discussion for the last 2 years now. It's like, all right, you got to figure out who's going to be playing in center. With Johan, I think obviously he's had a pretty good spring at the plate. We haven't seen him in the field up until this past week, but we know what he can do in the field. We've seen it over the last 2 years, that he's maybe one of the best center fielders defensively in baseball. Then he had a pretty good winter ball league too down in the Dominican. So I don't know, man. Yeah, it's especially against Gore, like you said, you don't want to go out and throw all these lefties out there right away. But now that you add Max Kepler, which that was the big thing, they wanted to add a right-handed bat, then they would go out and get a left-handed bat and Kepler, and it kind of brings this topic of discussion back up. So yeah, I don't know what they're going to do. I think you could go Marsh. I think Marsh will probably start in center field on opening day. I don't really see why you wouldn't, just because of even with the bats and stuff. But it's still Brandon Marsh. I don't know how you would kind of turn him down and start with Johan. But it's been a discussion now that we've had for the last 2 years of, you have these two guys and you bring in Kepler as well, who's had a heck of a spring. I know he kind of got banged up a little bit. He ran into the fence the other day, but I think he's okay. Just little bangs and bruises, it sounded like. But yeah, who knows, man? It's always going to be fun when you have, two players like that, and Johan Rojas and Brandon Marsh battling for that center field spot and see what they can do.
Well, something to consider too with the lefties is that the first two series of the season for the Phillies are against the Nationals and Rockies, who don't have any like stifling lefties on their pitching staffs. Mackenzie Gore is a lefty, but like we said, reverse platoon splits. First 6 games of the season, you're not going to really have to worry about like Marsh and Kepler facing tough lefties. Then you go to the Dodgers and they have Blake Snell in the rotation, Tanner Scott in the bullpen. The Braves follow that. They could have Chris Sale in that series. So then it becomes a consideration. I think by the third or fourth series of the season, by like mid-April, by the second week of April, we'll have a better idea of how dedicated the Phillies are to, starting Marsh in center field against lefties. But it underscores like the importance of Weston Wilson. If he was healthy, he could have been an option to back up both Kepler and potentially Marsh in center because he's played that position a little bit over the years. And Wilson's it's not like he's out forever. That was a 6-week injury that took place on like February 21st. So, I mean, he could be ready potentially mid to late April to help the Phillies on the bench. But, a lot of these roster battles are finished with. There's still a little bit of uncertainty in the outfield. As we said, Oscar Mercado remains in camp. He could be in play if Rojas' shoulder isn't healthy enough for the season. Rojas jammed that shoulder sliding into second base in the Dominican Winter League a couple months ago, and that's why the Phillies have been so slow with him in the field in spring training. And then in the bullpen, that Taijuan Walker will be on the opening day roster. It seems very clear at this point. And then it just depends, like if both Strahm and Suarez start on the IL, that means 2 guys could make it out of the group of Krismet, Tyler Phillips, Kyle Tyler, and Michael Mercado. But if only one of Suarez or Strahm begins on the IL, that means only one of those 4 guys can do it. And, those are names that we weren't really talking about being on the opening day roster. We were saying, 1 spot open on the pitching staff and maybe 1 spot on the bench. But that's why you add depth, non-roster invitees, guys like Krismat, for example, who's gotten outs for the Dodgers and Padres over the years. He started yesterday's game or Thursday's game in Northport against the Braves. I think the Phillies want to just see how he handled himself against some top bats because, you want to see that if you're actually going to carry a guy on the opening day roster. But the other part of this, we haven't mentioned the name the first 17 minutes here, but Andrew Painter is also going to be able to help the Phillies at some point this season. I don't think the Ranger Suarez injury changes that time frame for him because they're going to be as cautious as possible with Andrew Painter. But when you think about starting pitching depth, it's not just that the Phillies have like a Walker or a Joe Ross. They also have one of the top pitching prospects in all of baseball who might be, getting 5 innings for them in mid-July. Yeah.
The excitement's there, man. We talked about in the last pod, even just that whole bullpen that he threw was incredible just to see everyone kind of show up and watch him. I think the excitement, the build-up's there. Because, I think when you and I went to see him in Fort Myers against the Twins when he made that first start 2 years ago, the excitement was there too, and he was 18 or 19 at the time too. And now he'll be 21 here shortly. But yeah, man, that's exciting. And real quick to kind of go back into like option stuff, a name that we, still talking about the bench, Cody Clemens has had a hell of a spring so far. And he, one of those guys that's out of options. So if you, decide to send him down, will probably be picked up by a team if he goes through waivers. But I just want to, I'm looking at his stats right now. 16 games, he's batting .317. He has 2 bombs, 7 RBIs. Doing well. Do you think Cody has a chance of making the team, especially with the Weston Wilson injury still?
Cody Clemens is a really good guy. He's really well liked in the Phillies clubhouse, and he's performed as a pinch hitter and as a spot starter and in spring training. But to me, it seems like more of a trade candidate because like the point of carrying Cody Clemens would be that you could have him pinch hit late in a game, right? Yeah. But what right-handed hitter are you pinch hitting for? Are you pinch hitting for JT? No. You pinch hitting for Nick Castellanos? No. Trey Turner? No. Alec Bohm? No. So,
right.
So really, what purpose does a guy like that? When you're so left-handed as the Phillies are, right. I just don't know that they can carry him. That's why I think a guy like, my personal opinion, like Oscar Mercado might make more sense for the opening day bench. The guy who I think makes more sense is Christian Arroyo, who could be a potentially impactful bench hitter, guy who has some pop.
Can also play any position in the field too, right?
Well, in the infield, first, second,
right? Infield wise,
he play first, second, and third, and the Phillies have gotten him a little bit of time in the corner outfield. But with Christian Arroyo, I'm talking about. But that's just why I think that he makes more sense over Cody Clemens. Arroyo was a guy that the Phillies signed right as camp began, and a lot of times, like you gloss over a name like that because he isn't signed until spring training begins, and you're thinking about all the other guys who are battling for spots, and it turns out he might have won that job.
Yeah.
But if it is if this is the end of the road with the Phillies for Cody Clemens because of contractual reasons, he gave them like everything that they would have asked for out of a guy in that role. They got him in the Gregory Soto trade, and he's ended up making more of an impact for them than Gregory Soto did.
It really did, man. He really did. And yeah, that was for Maton and Vierling too, right? That was the trade that sent those two out there. So two guys that were, on that fun 2022 squad. And yeah, and like you said, man, Cody's such a good dude as well. I really enjoyed our interactions in the clubhouse and stuff with him. But again, it's just like with Stubbs, it's baseball, and it's the business of baseball. And some of these guys that some of your favorite players, as a fan could be gone just like that because of spring training. And
I'm not saying it's a slam dunk that he's not going to make the team, but I mean,
for sure.
Arroyo's also performing, getting 324 with like a near to 900 OPS in spring. And just in terms of roster context, I just think he makes a little bit more sense. And just lastly, with the bullpen competition, I mentioned Nabil Krismat pitched against the Braves in Northport on Thursday. The fact that he got through 3 innings against that top lineup, only giving up 1 run. He's not a bat misser, not a strikeout guy, but I would think that bodes well for his chances of making the opening day roster. So we'll wait and see.
He ran into some trouble too. Like he ran into trouble in the first inning and got out of it just like that. So yeah, and that, like you mentioned, that goes a long way when Rob's watching these guys pitch, especially when you're facing, some of these top end guys on the other team. So yeah, man. Well, and we talked about it on the last spot too. I got a chance to talk to Nabil a little bit down there. Also just a great human being. Like came up to me and was like, "Hey man, how's your day?" It's great. I love guys like that, man. It's awesome. So
So I mean, sometimes it's better to have a guy experience a little bit of difficulty like that, get into a jam, work himself out of it. That shows you a little bit of something. I mean, the results don't matter this time of year anyway. So looking like he might have an inside track to that final bullpen job. But we're going to talk a lot more about the season, do some previews, some predictions, talk about the division. Hopefully do that on Monday morning, but wanted to get you a little Phillies talk heading into the weekend. So for Spencer McKercher, what you got? Real quick. What you got?
I mean, it's March Madness too. Who you got bracket-wise?
I'm going to go with is Drexel in it this year? No, I had Michigan. Aren't they already out?
No, they won last night. They won on Thursday. They beat UC San Diego. Close game.
Did they? Okay, Close so game. I had them going far. Yeah.
Nice.
Honestly, this was a year where I'm just like so flummoxed by everything that's going on right now that I just kind of like filled out a bracket, didn't put any thought or research into it. I'm just doing it to do it. But how about you?
I got the Dukies, man. I got the Dukies. So just need them to get it done, and we'll see how it goes. It's exciting, man. It's the best time of the year. As you mentioned at the beginning, 6 days away, dude. It was funny, I had some friends like, let's, can we get together next week? I was like, yeah, sure. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh wait, no, we cannot.
Maybe in 7 months or so. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. I'll see you in October.
Yeah.
November. We'll say that.
All right. For Spencer McKercher, I'm Corey Seidman. Thanks for listening to the Phillies Talk podcast. Have a great weekend.